America was established not to create wealth, but to realize a vision, to realize an ideal, to discover and maintain liberty among men. Join us now with host Dr. Catherine Bene, Julie, Americans who make a difference.
Welcome to American Visions. I'm Dr. Catherine Bene, your host for the show with my dog, Julie. Now, this show is designed to give you glimpses into the lives of Americans. So stay with us. We'll show you the sights and have you hear the sounds of America and its people. So let's look at the land and its people. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about worms. Yeah, worms are older than mankind. And in fact, even at the time of dinosaurs, they were busy degrading waste and excrement. In the time of 30 to 51 BC, Queen Cleopatra VII, she was queen of Egypt, realized the importance of worms in making the fertile soil of the Nile. Well, even today, that soil remains one of the richest that exists on our planet. And then Charles Darwin, he also recognized the importance of worms. Then came the Industrial Revolution and the advent of fertilizers, pesticides, and landfills. Now, one thing you have to know about landfills is that they compress the garbage. It degrades anaerobically, and as a byproduct is an acidic mixture called leachate, which gets into our waters and waterways to contaminate them. Also at landfills, greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane are produced. Well, we have a solution that'll take care of your garbage that's older than mankind. But before we go there, let's look at our flowers. They're from Flower World, unique and personal flower arrangements for you and yours. And there we see apples, and nestled amongst the apples are worms. Well depicted Flower World, unique and personal flower arrangements. They're at 2925 East Prospect Road. Go visit them. You won't be disappointed. They never cease to disappoint. They never disappoint us. It's absolutely amazing how they relate to our themes. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guest, who, by the way, will come to us today with some last-minute Christmas suggestions. You say, worms? Well, let him explain that to you. He is Mr. Jim Shaw. He is the owner and founder of Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. Uncle Jim, or shall we just call you Jim? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I must say, Mr. Shaw, that I've met many different types of farmers. We have those that have livestock. We have those that raise tobacco and plants, flower farmers. But I have never met a worm farmer. How did you ever worm your way into that special niche?
Well, as a young child, probably 8 years old, my father was from Vermont, and he was a fisherman. And we had lived in Connecticut, and he said, Jim, why don't you start selling worms? So as a young kid, I was the kid who had the sign out in front of his lawn. And
it wasn't lemonade, huh?
No, it wasn't lemonade, it was worms. It was night crawlers. And then as I got older, I started selling more. And then it's kind of one of those things, you start out as a kid, and then as you go old, it matures, and then you have children of your own, and you pass it on, and it was a hobby that more or less got out of control. Out of control.
Well, recently you had the honor of being featured on Earth Day on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Tell us about that.
Well, Oprah's executive director called us, and they had an Earth Day 2008, and they said they wanted something environmentally friendly. And for whatever reason, they picked worms.
Well, natural fertilizer,
yes.
Right?
And the worms and the composters. And what we did was we worked with them over the course of 3 weeks on gathering the worms, explaining what the worms do. And it was kind of cute because Julia Roberts was with Oprah, and they were both a little squeamish at first, but explaining what the worms do.
Now, I want our viewers to understand that this is no small-scale operation. And we have a video that's going to take us to Uncle Jim's worm farm. Now, let's start to roll that video. Now, Jim, most people can count their livestock. They know about how many cows are in their herd. Do you have any way of estimating how many worms you actually have?
Gazillions. How's that sound?
Explain what we're looking at here.
Well, right now, we raise our worms in barrels or bins, whichever word you prefer, and we have a mixture of moss and bedding in each drum. And each drum is cared for, just like you'd care for each of your livestock or whatever. Each drum has to be fed, watered on a daily basis, misted, picked to make sure the drum isn't overwhelmed with the worms.
Now, who are we featuring here? I'm talking about the humans.
Okay, the humans, that's my son John and my son David. John is, he's a Penn State graduate who enjoys worms. My other son Jimmy's a Penn State graduate. He's upstairs doing all the computer work. But there we are. That particular worm is a red worm. It's a composting worm that basically lives in the top 3 to 4 inches of the soil. Just like every human being is different and every tree in a forest is different, there's over 3,000 different variety of worms. Now that particular worm that I'm holding is more of an aerating worm that can go deeper into the soil, which allows rain to get into your garden or into your lawn or your golf course or your playground, and makes the grass greener and healthier versus naturally versus chemically.
My goodness, what happens if you get the wrong worm in the wrong bin?
Don't worry about it. Those worms cohabitate, no problem. They won't fight with one another or what have you, but it is good to separate them because the clientele is after a specific worm in most cases.
Mm-hmm. And what are these worms?
Those worms, let's see, those are called jumpers.
Jumpers, what does that mean?
They're a worm that loves the tropical weather. It's grown down south in the Georgia area. It's kind of a combination of a composting worm and aerating worm.
Oh my goodness, there's some activity going on there.
Oh yeah, if you might catch one jumping here sooner or later, but it's a healthy worm. It's a good worm to ship.
Look at that.
There we go. There we go.
What's the purpose of the jumping? Wow.
Hey, the purpose is, that's the way God made it. I couldn't tell you why, but it's in its gene pool. Each worm has its own different little distinctive characteristic.
Now you have those worms separated into white bins as opposed to the blue bins where you're actually cultivating them.
Well,
why is that?
The blue bins are where we raise them. We keep it dark, we keep it moist. It's almost like a mushroom. And then what happens is we pick the worms out of the blue drums, we sort them from the soil, and we put them into the clear containers, and then from there we pack.
Now this looks like a big operation going on here. What's happening?
Well, right here is we're getting ready to pack. Our mainstay is orders of 1,000, 2,000, and 5,000.
Wow.
And what we're doing
is... Who's involved in this? I saw a woman there.
Yeah, that's my wife.
Wow.
All right, I have 8 children, and our parents live with us. My parents live with us on the farm, and there's always a lot of activity going on.
All those bags getting ready to be mailed? Is that how you send them?
Yes, that's how we send them. We pack them in dry peat moss after we sort them, and they've been weighed out. For the most part, 1,000 worms is 1 pound. They're packed in dry peat moss. They're bagged.
Those bags aren't plastic. They're like a sack.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like a burlap material.
So they can breathe?
Yes, yes. Well, we've over the years you find out how to ship them because you don't want to lose them.
Put them up. Look at that.
Yeah, that's John. He's being very kind to the worms.
And then you pack them with paper so they can't shift all around, I assume.
Well, you don't want them to shift around, and you want them to be aerated. You want to have a lot of air in the box because you really don't know where the postal man is going to leave it on his truck.
Oh, and then you send them through the U.S. mail.
Yes.
That's just amazing.
Yes.
So you buy them by the pound knowing that there's about 1,000 worms in 1 pound.
Right.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to go to break. Remember, you can help prevent low back pain by taking your wallet out of your pocket, and also don't wear your pants too tight. We're going to hear from Edsweiler Funeral Home, specializing in personalized funerals, because it's all about you, as well as audio professionals, your true hearing specialist. We'll be right back. Don't wiggle. Welcome back to American Visions. I'm Dr. Catherine Bene with Mr. Jim Shaw. He is the owner of Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. And in our first segment, we had a preview of his operation. And I'd like to rejoin Mr. Shaw and talk a little bit about that operation, the worm farming.
Sure.
And you mentioned you had 8 kids. Looks like everybody's involved with things. Did you bring a picture of the family?
Yes, I did. Now, this picture's got a little age to it. It's probably about 8 or 9 years old. My daughter, Jackie, She's a Penn State graduate. She's involved. My daughter Jimmy, he's a computer man and works with the internet. Penn State graduate. And let's see, my son John, he's graduated from Penn State.
He's changed a little bit.
Yeah, he's changed a little bit. Both Jimmy and John have played football, right, at Penn State.
Tell him his position.
Well, John's an offensive tackle, and Jimmy was a defensive end, and swore they'd never get involved in worms.
Oh.
Okay, and now they love it. That's right.
And you wormed them right in there.
That's right. And my daughter Jennifer, my daughter Mary, my daughter Katie, and you saw David on the screen.
Yeah, he's still cute.
Yeah, he's still cute. He's involved in it. My lovely wife Tricia.
She still looks the same.
That's right. My daughter Ann. Let's see, I didn't miss any of the family, did I? Okay, and myself. And that's Robin, that's Ed, and that's Ed's dad. And they
Obviously, you need a lot of supportive personnel.
Oh my. Ed's dad had cut every drum, drilled the holes in every drum, and it was over 5,000 drums.
Wow, and you're expanding, as I understand.
Yes, yes. And in this day of everything going green and what have you, the demand is increased. Mm-hmm. So with that demand, we need more product.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the product and what it does. Specifically, what kinds of functions do these worms serve? What do they do that makes them so valuable?
Well, as we said before, two of the biggest hobbies in America are fishing and gardening. And worms play a big role in both of those hobbies. And the gardeners, the secret to a good garden is in the soil. And with everything going natural, compost piles have been a big additive to your garden. Mm-hmm. You compost your green grass and your twigs and your leaves and your manure. You get it into that state of black gold is what we call it, where your tomatoes and your lettuce and your, any garden vegetable.
Well, it's amazing to me that worms even eat things like eggshells, vegetable peeling. They're not too fond of like onions and things like that, or citrus fruits. But many of the things that we throw away from our kitchen are actually good worm food.
Quite frankly, anything that's capable of decaying is a good food for the worm.
Now, do you have composters available?
Yeah, we have on our website, www.unclejim.com, there's a variety of composters. There's different composters for the quote-unquote the housewife who wants to compost in her kitchen with just her kitchen
I'm just thinking this is a fun project for the kids.
My. They
let's throw it into the composter.
Sure.
And right before your eyes, like magic.
Yes, and I've had a lot of schools contact me because it's not only good as far as composting, but it's fun. It's sometimes fun should be the main objective.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about your own worms? If you want to grow your own worms, don't you have something to facilitate that?
Well, we have kits that includes the bedding, the feed, the worms, the container, and the instructions.
Did you bring a nursery with you?
Well, this is a little different, but this is for young children, and this is an earthworm nursery. Okay, and
some of the ideas for Christmas.
Right, and the interesting thing about the earthworm nursery is that this is probably going to be the Henry Ford of the worm business. I don't know if we can zero in, but
put them in the palm of your hand and hold them. And take them out of the bag.
Let me put them in the palm of your hand.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah. This isn't alive.
No, these aren't alive, but these are called vermipods. It's a worm egg encapsulated in some nutrient-rich clay. Can you get a shot of that? I don't know if you can or not. Oh, okay. And in this particular toy, the vermipods are put in one area, and moisture's added, and they hatch out, and there's a block of bedding that's put in this area, and they migrate into the block. And it's just a good fun toy for kids of any age.
That would be great of any age. And how long do these vermipods live, so to speak, that they're viable?
At room temperature, it's usually 2 weeks before they hatch out. Oh. However, a worm cocoon.
Last one. Huh. There you go.
A worm cocoon could last as long as a year and a half in a frozen state.
Oh.
In a refrigerated state.
So eggs survive during the winter. See, I've often wondered, now you were talking about how worms sometimes live in the top 2 inches of soil.
Sure.
Don't they freeze in the winter?
Well,
there go your worms?
The older worms do eventually move on to worm heaven, but before that, they know when it's starting to get cold. And they'll really start laying capsules.
A lot of eggs.
A lot of eggs. And an egg can have as many as 20 young. Okay, so what happens is the older worms move on, but the capsules can actually freeze solid all winter long. Then in the spring, they hatch out.
Now you have a lot of worms, as you said, gazillions.
Yes.
Do you have to worry about worm carcasses?
No, no. Usually when a worm moves on, when a worm passes on, within 6 hours, it goes back to the soil.
I guess a lot of it's water anyways.
Yes, it's about 98% water.
Oh, what is the lifespan of a worm?
A worm can live up to 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, yes, 4 years.
That's amazing. Now, if you're going to buy some worms, say, for your garden,
Sure.
how do you get them? Do you get them as the vermipod, the egg, a mature worm, or how? I saw you bagging them up, so obviously some of those are mature worms. What's the best way to buy a worm?
Well, they're sold in lots of 1,000. They're packed in dry peat moss. Basically, it is what it is. It's a worm, and that's when you buy a worm, you get 1,000 worms put into the dry peat moss.
Are there worms in here?
No, there's not worms in there.
Soil in there.
Yeah, there's soil in there. I did bring a few worms here. I don't know, but this is. Can we get a shot of that?
Okay. Oh, that's a lot of worms.
Yeah, no,
I'll vouch for that. I hope nobody's eating spaghetti at home.
Oh, that's okay. They could eat the worms.
It doesn't bother you. By the way, you know, worms do have a lot of omega-3 fatty acid. It would lower your cholesterol. And people used to living in the wild, all those special forces guys, they eat worms and beetles and things. Have you ever eaten your worms?
Hey.
Well, this isn't how you're feeding your family.
Who knows? Hey, it makes the robins look pretty.
I guess if you have a pet bird, this is for you too.
That's
I guess
right.
you sell to pet shops, golf courses, gardeners, fishermen.
Well, at one time we were in 10 magazines. We were in reptile magazines, bird talk magazines, survivalist magazines, country journal magazines, aquarium fish magazines. So a big variety of.
One other little interesting point that you told me when I visited was wives buy worms for their husbands.
That's right. Well, you know, everybody likes to get a little eccentric, and everybody likes to surprise their spouse now and then. And women just like the worms for their husbands.
Well, I guess if they're gardeners too, what better gift to make your garden grow?
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about worm preferences. If you buy these worms, can you expect them to live 4 years? Are they going to stay? How can you assure that your worm is happy and healthy?
Well, I just hope I sell them to people that are kind, loving people who take care of their worms. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, well, when we come back, we're going to have to explore what makes a worm happy. But before we do that, remember, someone said, after all is said and done, more is often said than done. Think about that. We're going to hear from East York Optical, setting your sights on a sharper focus. We'll be right back. Welcome back to American Visions. I'm Dr. Catherine Bene with Mr. Jim Shaw, who is the owner of Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. Before we get back to that, though, I'd like to talk to you about some other things. As you get older, you know, it's really harder to do any activity without getting more tired more easily. And aerobic activity, though, may really help you to maintain your independence and delay the signs of aging. Regular aerobic activity may actually help your lung function and improve the ways that your lungs use oxygen. Now, some experts estimate that this type of exercise may also prolong your life by 10 to 12 years. Treadmills are a great form of aerobic exercise, and many of you probably have one at home. But with any form of intense exercise, remember, it's always important to warm up. And then after warming up, you can gradually increase the speed and the incline on your treadmill. But before you start, check out the controls. You got to know how to hit the emergency stop button. Now, some treadmills even have a safety stop device that's often a cord that will attach to your wrist and then shut the treadmill off automatically if you should fall. Remember, don't step on and off your treadmill if it's moving, and you want to avoid getting too close to the back edge of the treadmill. And when you're done, unplug it. And don't let your pets or children play near the treadmill. Now, having considered all of these things, you're ready to get started. So my advice to you is walk on. Remember, life isn't merely about being alive, it's also living well. Now back to Mr. Jim Shaw. Now, Jim, you have a couple of other interesting things to tell us about. One was that worm tea bag.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of our favorite products. It's basically the blackest, richest composting material coming right out of our worm bins, and it's put in this bag. And it's a tea bag that we sell. that you just put this, you get some lukewarm water in your watering can. You set this in overnight, and it basically, just like you would make tea in your kitchen in the morning, this is making worm tea for your household plants and your garden plants.
Just be sure you don't get your cups mixed up. Oh boy. Okay, well that's also an interesting idea. And then if you are going to have some worms, is there anywhere you can read more about it?
Well, on our website we have, oh my, probably a dozen and a half different books. This is Raising Large Worms. As an example, A Worming Weed Did Go, a little bit of humor about a housewife who decided to be a worm farmer. Let an Earthworm Be Your Garbage Man, talking about composting.
Oh yes, they've been referred to as virtual garbage cans.
That's right, the guts of the earth.
That's right.
Okay.
Have a lot of fun with this one.
That's right, the Nightcrawler Manual. And any person over the age of 10 that's ever gone fishing or under the age or any age has usually gone out and picked night crawlers at night. ABCs of the Worm Business, if you'd like to try your hand at it. And the Worm Book. Anything you'd like to know about worms.
Comprehensive. I might add, you have to make sure your tetanus shots are up to date when you're playing around in the earth. And if you don't want to get your nails dirty, be sure to wear rubber gloves.
That's right.
So these are all the things that you can do to get started. Now, having your worms there, how are you going to keep them? Because after all, if they're not happy, they're just going to crawl away, right?
Well, a happy worm is kind of like you or I. A happy worm is going to stay put, and that's the moisture level of the soil, the amount of feeding.
Well, they don't like it too moist.
Well, I like to say it, the moisture.
No, worms come out in the rain. Why is that?
Well, worms come out in the rain because they don't like where they're at. That's why they come out in the rain.
I mean, they don't want to drown.
That's right. They like it down in their burrows, but
too much rain is not good.
They're getting flooded out. I like to say if a good moisture soil is soil moisture is if you grab the soil and the water comes out of your knuckles, that's fine, but not pouring out. Layman's
You got to get your hands into it.
That's right.
Now, is there any way to keep them warmer for the winter so they don't freeze?
Well, you could keep them in a garage or a basement, and even if you were to put a 10-watt light bulb and hang it over your worm bin, as long as that soil starts getting warm, they should be fine.
I'm thinking of like in the winter time, though, in the garden.
In the garden, things are just going to happen naturally. Although if you do have a compost pile, they know where to hide, they know where to go.
Or if you have some leaves remaining, maybe that would keep them a little warmer too.
Or even a extra piece of old carpet, a piece of burlap, put that over the top of your compost pile. And that,
so it breathes, no plastic.
Exactly.
How many times farmers have to clean up after their livestock? Do you have anything to clean up after worms, any manure?
Well, what happens is after a while, the soil gets so black, you do have to change it. And what you'll do is you'll take that soil, start a new bin, and replace half of that bin with new soil.
Many gardeners use manure. Does that mix well with worms?
Some manure does, some manure doesn't. No, let's say horse manure. A lot of horse people feed their horses dewormer.
Oh.
Okay, and they don't want to realize it, but
contaminated manure.
Yes, that dewormer gets into the manure, and the worms don't like it. So I get a lot of calls. Hey, I thought worms like manure. In a lot of instances, they don't.
And do you have to worry about pests, parasites, or diseases for your worms?
Well, you know, you have red ants, you have black ants, white mites, red mites, springtails. They all, to some degree, all tend to like the same food source.
Can you overfeed your worms? Can they get obese?
Can they get obese?
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to answer that on the next show. Maybe you'll come back and tell us about it.
I don't know if there's an LA Fitness for worms, but if there is, we'll look for we'll look for one.
We thank you for coming. We've seen another glimpse into a great American life. Remember, the strength of our country is made up of the diversity and contributions of our people. This and our ideals make us very proud to be American. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you again next week. Good night, Jim, and thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Send your comments to WGCB, Post Office Box 88, Red Line, Pennsylvania 17356.